Well, it's been just over a year since my last VIP Dragons tier list, so you know what that means. It's time for a new one. And so we have all of these VIPs, we've got some new VIPs since then, and I'm just going to say now that in advance, I think that most dragons that have the same skills but just different elements being their only difference will be at the same classification. So if you only see one dragon from a particular family, that is why. But anyway, the exception to that would be dragons that have different skills to each other, such as the Spiked family, Berserkers for instance. So we will go through all of those today, and we do have S to D tier this time, and being in D tier still means that these mythicals or legendary VIPs are still usable, but even the worst of the worst may still be usable, but compared to some of the other options, they may not be too fantastic. And so we are going to start off this tier list today with the newest dragons, and this time it is going to be the new Skeletal Extractor. And so I will say that Extractors as a whole leave a lot to be desired right now. They did get buffed at some point, but I don't think they have as much going for them as other dragons, because all that they do is heal, whereas other dragons, they damage and heal and sometimes do other stuff. So I'm actually going to pop Extractors in D, and that is also the case for all of the other Extractors. I don't have all of them here, but that does include Ravenous Extractor. And yeah, Ravenous is mythical, so he's got the bonus for his class as well, but as a whole, I don't think it is enough to put them quite at C tier, but they are still usable, so don't take B tier as like, oh my god, they're completely unusable, because it's not true. The next dragons that we have are actually the Spiked dragons, and Spiked dragons are quite different to each other. And these are some of the dragons that I have used the least. I've only been able to use them a little bit in testing. I'm actually going to say it right now that I think Spikes as a whole are very good. I'm actually going to be putting Mr. Claus at S tier. One, because he looks swanky as hell, and secondly, because I do think he is quite a quality dragon. I do have some images here of the various dragons and their skills that we can go through, but Spiked Claus in particular I think is a good one, because if we check his in-game description for his skill, you see he's got Impaling Outrage, so deals instant damage, protects the user from an attack, and it damages the opponent, and he also has Claw Cutter, which hits 3 to 5 times, which can also instantly negate shields. I think as a whole, he's a very good dragon, and plus he has Mythical as well, which really helps him. So I do think he is a very good dragon, and I'm just going to do it here. It's also a bit of a spicy pick, but I'm actually also going to put Quills up there in S tier. Now, the reason I'm putting Quills in S tier, because Quills also has Impaling Outrage, but the reason why I'm putting Rolling Quills in there on top is because dealing damage to all opponents, well, if you didn't know, Phoenix perk is a little bit bugged right now, and so dragons that do these AoE multi-hit skills, they can actually just negate Phoenix entirely. So while that exists, I'm actually putting Spiked Quills up in S tier. If that ever gets fixed, maybe I'd put her down at A tier, but I think that as a whole, Impaling Outrage plus another really good skill is quite good. I have to say, I think these sit somewhere between A and S tier, and purely because I think that they have a lot of potential with other dragons. That's the reason why I'm putting them in S, but I think they could sit anywhere between A and S tier. So with the other Spiked dragons that we've got Spiked Pegasus, for example, which deals any remaining damage to another opponent and deals instant damage. These other dragons are legendaries, not mythicals, and then we've got Spiked Leatherback, which deals instant damage, so he only has Impaling Outrage, and then we've got Spiked Raptor, which is just Impaling Shelter. And so they are quite different in those senses. I'm actually going to do a spiffy and put Spiked Raptor 2 tiers below that in B, and then I'm going to put the other two in A tier, so don't mind that, we are doing this. So the reasoning for this being, we've got Mythicals in S, we've got the dragons with multiple skills in A, and then the one with a single skill goes in B. So there is my general logic with those, but I think that Spikes as a whole do have a very good skill, but Spikes, you might, well, Raptor, he could probably sit somewhere between here, but since we've only got a limited amount of categories, that's how I'm going to place him for now, but B is still very good. S is obviously like some of the better dragons in the game. So next up we have guard dragons, and I absolutely adore guard dragons, but the thing is they have quite low damage, They don't really have too much else going on for them apart from just that bunker, but bunker is incredibly good. Well, I say bunker, that's actually the Walking Dead's version, but the difference between the Walking Dead dragons and guard dragons is that the Walking Dead's actually do a little bit more damage than them. So specifically for that, because I think we have a direct upgrade version, I'm going to put the guards in A tier, but I think being able to negate crits as a whole makes guard dragons incredibly strong, very good to put on a team. But then again, you've got guards that negate damage, well, not all damage, but negate most damage and negate crits for 3 turns. And then you've got the spike dragons, which typically do it for once, right? So there is a difference between how they're used. They're very similar in concept, but they do have differences in their usage, so bear that in mind. Next up, we have the Berserker Dragons, and so when we're looking at the Berserkers, these dragons do also have differences in their skills. For instance, we have Perma Wound, which has Perma Wound Plus, which huge damage is dealt, but the user is also hurt, and they also have Berserk for all the Berserkers, so deals increasing damage after knocking out up to 2 opponents. So Berserk is their main skill, and you normally pair this with a Reaper perk, but I will say that having Perma Wound and Reaper perk and Berserk is an incredibly dangerous combination. The only downside to Perma Wound is that he actually doesn't do quite as well in his specific arenas as you would probably like. Otherwise, I would probably put him in S tier. It's just he gets crit quite a lot. So for that reason alone, I'm actually going to pop him in A instead of S tier. But at the same time, this dragon could easily go up to S. I think he definitely sits between these 2 tiers, somewhere between there. I'm going to pop him in A to be a little bit cautionary with him, purely because, again, you may not get the best value out of his specific arenas with him, but he's still very good overall as a dragon. So then when it comes to the other Berserker dragons here, for example, we have Mave Berserker, we have Berserk and Mave Mash, so damage is higher when the user's health is low. I feel like Mave Mash is another gimmicky one, just like it always is with these abilities, but it's still a Reaper at the end of the day, so I'm actually also going to pop them in A tier. You know, Perma Wound, I think he's about the same as the others, to be completely honest with you. Rage Root Berserker, we've got Berserk and Roots of Rage. Now, Roots of Rage is followed by a free random swap. It's essentially Usurper Vampire skill thrown onto a Berserker. This guy, however, I am going to put in B tier. Purely because, yeah, I don't think that secondary skill makes him quite as good as the other options there, so he's going in B tier. Then next up, we have Bedweir Berserker, and he also has Berserk, and similar to Mr. Krabs, he hits 3 to 5 times, which can be a very useful skill. I'm also popping him in A tier with his other brethren. And then the final one that we have is Rampage Berserker, which deals low to medium damage, but gives an extra turn and Berserk. And this one I think has the potential to do a lot of really good stuff. I'm also going to pop him in A. So I'm going to leave all of them in A, with Perma sort of sitting a little bit higher on average, but it doesn't matter whether they're on the left or the right, by the way. Everything in A, B, C, D should be roughly about the same as each other, but, you know, we can give a little bit of a caveat that, yeah, maybe they could tip a little bit higher on the A scale, but it's not in order of left to right, just so that you're aware. So I guess we're not really in order of dragons anymore, but the next one we're going to look at here is Deadlocked Plasma. And now, Deadlocked Plasma is, like most plasmas, maybe not the bestest dragon, and it does depend on whether you have her skin or not as to how useful she is. But because of her passive skill alone and her having mythical, I'm actually going to pop her in B tier, if we're talking skinless, with skin, which is, everyone should be able to get that if they finish collection, actually. Maybe it would sit a little bit at A tier, so it does matter a little bit whether you have the skin or not. But I'm going to throw Deadlock in there mainly because she is a passive dragon for the most part. So if you're not aware of Deadlock Plasma, let's just search her up right now. Deadlock Plasma, if we take a look at the skills, they have Ruling Parasite, so attacking the team with a life-stealing skill damages the opponent instead. And so this is passive, you don't have to do anything to activate it. Obviously with the skin, you get bonuses based on you having the skin, which is always lovely. But I will say that for the passive skill alone, and because you will typically run into vampires every so often, I think it does put her at least at B tier. Even as a passive, you can make her a big tank or whatever you want to do as a damage sponge. But I don't think she could be put any higher than B tier. But against vampires specifically, because the AI is really bad, and purely because the AI is really bad, that's why I'm putting her in B tier and not C tier. So then we have the regular plasmas, and I am actually going to put the regular plasmas in C because they don't have those boosted stats or anything like that, but they're still very good with passive skills overall if you are going against vampires. So they always have a use. So I'm still going to pop them in C tier, but they don't have quite as much usage as some of the others, but they are direct counter dragons that are used quite a lot. Next up, we have Eternals, and whether the Eternal is mythical or legend, I don't really think changes much, and I am actually going to pop him down in D tier, somewhere between C and D tier. Normally you put Reaper perks on your Eternal dragons, but they just don't have quite enough going for them, and they aren't direct counters for anything like the plasmas are. So that is the reason why I'm doing it that way. Next up, we've got Quantums, and I'll be honest, I think they're also D tier. They are, yeah, I'd say I put them roughly in around about the same category. They are direct counters to Karmas, but, you know, I guess actually, you know, if we think about them in terms of direct counter potential, I'm actually going to change my mind and pop them in C tier. Purely because if you have them available to select for an arena, you can just swap them in whenever they're applicable. So rather than them being very whatever, like Eternals or Extractors, for instance, at least they have a specific purpose. So that's why I'm going to change my mind there and throw them in there. Next up, we have Arcanas with Arcana Absorption. So there are two different kinds of Arcanas, and there is one Arcana that just deals some more damage, but you know, it's a little bit gimmicky. But then we've got these Arcanas, which are Arcana Absorption, which both heal and they deal damage. And I'm actually going to pop these dragons into S tier because I think Arcanas with Arcana Absorption are incredibly good. It's basically like you've got dragons that just heal or dragons that just damage, but Arcanas do both. They are incredibly annoying to deal with, and I don't like facing them, so I'm going to pop them in S tier, and plus they kind of look pretty cool as well. We've got another Eternal here, non-mythical, that's also going in D tier, I'm sorry. Next up, we have the other Arcanas. So just to go through the other Arcana ability for anyone that isn't too familiar with them. So Arcana Death, like I said, has Arcana Absorption, hits multiple times, heals the user, damages all opponents. But then we have Arcanas like Arcana Tower, which have Berserk. So the damage inflicted increases with the amount of damage received. So it's this very gimmicky ability, which we also have similarly on dragons like Gluttonous Vampire. And I'll be honest, I just don't find this ability to be as all-encompassing as some of the others. It's very, very gimmicky when you can use it. That being said, you can deal big damage with it, but I personally do not like the skill very much, and I think I'm actually going to put it in D tier. Mainly because it doesn't directly counter anything. It's very gimmicky to pull off, and especially with people having so many Reaper perks these days, I think that the skill as a whole has fallen off a little bit. Now, if you pack on the Phoenix perks, that's great, but then you're going to get less usage out of those sorts of skills when an enemy doesn't have big Reaper perks. So purely because we're given so many Reaper perks these days, I think things have changed a little bit on this skills front, but I just don't think it gives them enough of leverage as a whole. So that's why he's going in there, poor boy. Next up, we have the Redemption Dragons, and as a whole, Redemption Dragons, we've either got the Revivers, or we have the ones like Doom here, which is No Remorse, damages all opponents, but the user is hurt. And this one isn't quite as gimmicky as the last one, but it does also damage all opponents, and since Phoenix perk is bugged, I will say that it does go up a little bit in terms of tiers, and I am going to pop them in C tier because they just do damage and nothing else. So compared to some of these other dragons, they don't really have too much going on in their kit, but I do definitely see the use, especially if you pack on those damage perks. They're borderline B, I would say, but not quite as good as I would like them to be. Now, next one we've got is actually what I would consider one of the best legendaries in the game, and that is the Walking Dead Dragons. So the Walking Dead Dragons are going to go in S tier, and the reason why they're going in S is because they're like guard dragons, but they deal a bit more damage, and they have a secondary skill. So just in case you're not too familiar with the Walking Dead Dragons, let me open up Michonne's page, for instance. So we've got 2 skills on the Walking Dead Dragons. Bunker deals damage and reduces damage dealt to the user and allies for several turns, and this does negate crits. It's very, very good. But then we also have a secondary skill. And now the main use for the Walking Dead Dragons as a whole is not for their damage, but I will say that because of the short cooldown on the skills like Annihilation, it does mean that these dragons have a lot of versatility. Bunker plus another skill, it just gives you so much to work with. And just another Walking Dead dragon, for instance, let's take a quick look at Rick. So we've got Bunker plus Machete Mayhem. Damage is dealt to another opponent if your current one is knocked out. So essentially they're just doubled up dragons with lots of skills on them, and they're already starting out really, really well with Bunker, so they are definitely some of the best available in the game. It's so unfortunate that they're not available anymore, so people put stupid trade ratios on them, but trust me, getting the Walking Dead dragon on your team, especially with a high damage dealer or a carry, is insanely useful. That's why they're going in S tier. Next one we've got is our boy Dual Perception specifically, so not a family of dragons, Dual Perception in particular. And now, Dual Perception is countered quite a lot in his relevant arenas when he goes against heroic VIPs. I'm actually going to throw him in A tier for his ability to one-shot dragons sometimes. He sits somewhere between B and A tier, I will say that. Somewhere here, I would say. I'm going to put him in A, despite knowing that he sometimes struggles in his arenas against heroic VIPs in particular. But we've got a lot of dragons, we've got more heroic VIPs coming out. I think we're going to get a lot more variety over time, so that's why I'm popping him in A, whereas I think I put him slightly... Did I put him below last time? I can't remember. But I definitely think he has a lot of versatility, and if you throw Reaper perks or something stupid on him, trust me, I hate facing this dragon sometimes in arena with Reaper perks on them, so that's the reason why I'm putting him in A, but he probably sits somewhere around B to A, considering his arenas. So, now we have the other redemption dragons. So before we had the ones with their damage skill, now we've got the revive redemptions. I'm actually going to pop these in B, but they don't have a lot else going on for them, because all that they do is revive, but a revive alone on a dragon can just set up so many things, and it is very, very annoying. On top of you being able to, you know, get your skill cooldowns going and things like that. So that's the reason why I'm popping him in B tier. All of the revive redemptions I would put in around about the same place. So next one we've got is the other dual dragon. So not prescription, we do have dual parliament, and I think that dual parliament is an interesting dragon. Actually, before I put her down there, let's actually get her skill up. So just to take a look at the skill, she has time steal, which deals multiple hits and gives an extra turn, and then also has dual destiny. Dual Destiny is the thing that lets this dragon down, because Dual Destiny is random, so it could heal yourself, it could heal allies, it could switch you out, or it could deal damage. And when you've got that sort of randomness on your skill, it is not great, because you are essentially banking on RNG with them. Time Steal, incredibly good. Dual Destiny, not too fantastic. And so, because of that, I'm actually going to pop them in C tier, just because the second skill is unreliable. But Time Steal alone puts her sort of borderline at B tier. It's just, I don't think that... I just can't trust the second skill. It's like a random, useless skill to me half the time. So that's the reason why I'm popping her there in C tier. Now, we do have Ascended Dragons here. And so just to get up the Ascended skill as well, we do have two types of Ascended Dragons, much like with the Arcana Dragons. So the dragon that I've got here is Oracle, and Oracle has Divine Sacrifice, so damages all opponents and heals all allies, but the user is hurt. And then if I go to put a ranking on these types of Ascended Dragons, I'm actually going to pop this one in A tier, because I do think that being able to damage and heal all allies is very, very, very good, especially if you throw on the perks there. The other Ascended Dragons that we have are those such as Ascended Praetor, which have Divine Intervention. And so Divine Intervention deals any remaining damage to another opponent, and you would have seen this on another skill that we took a look at before. This does have its uses, but I don't think it is as good as the other Ascended skill. And so for that reason, that is why Praetor and his compadres are going in B tier instead of A tier. So that is why he's going there. Next up, we've got Karmas, and I'm just going to say it, every single Karma in the game is pretty much the same, and purely because Karmas are RNG, I am throwing them in A tier. But Karmas do have the potential to sit at S tier, or they have the potential to sit at about C tier, if not D tier. Yeah, actually D tier. It would be anywhere between S and D tier depending on the RNG, but because of the potential for blocking and how annoying it is, and you can stack up the health perks, I think they sit about A tier. Purely because they're unreliable, I don't think we can pop them up there in S, but they are very, very good dragons. It's just you can't always guarantee that you're going to get a block, because it doesn't always happen. So the next dragons that we've got here are the Corrupted Dragons, the Corrupted Titans, and you know what? I'm going to change my stance on these slightly, because I believe I put them in the lowest tier, but I'm actually going to put these in C tier this time. The reason why is because more and more I'm finding that Leech as a whole can solo carry a team in Arena, and the Corrupted Titans, they have both a shield and they have a leech. And although it's not the best of either of those things, it definitely still gets its usage, and you can still E5 these dragons and get a lot of use. So for all of the Corrupteds that are in this category, the regular legends, I'm putting them in C. However, we do also have Corrupted Dragons such as Corrupted Legend and Corrupted Chaos. And now I do struggle a lot with where I'd want to put these dragons, either S or A tier. I'm actually going to put him purely in S tier at the moment, especially if you consider the current arena, because what is one of the current arena dragons? It is High White Tip Berserker, and you can have Corrupted Legend, which will heal back to full HP once you've got full damage perks on him, just through facing one dragon with Primal Element as their primary. So I really, really do love Corrupted Legend and Corrupted Chaos. They do have the highest stats compared to the regular Corrupteds, and I feel like because they aren't crit very often as well, they just get a lot of use. And I feel like Corrupted Legend in particular, very, very spicy one, very, very useful. But he probably sits closer to A tier, but I love him, so that's why I'm putting him in S tier. Sorry, bias. Let's cry about it. Anyway, now we've got the regular Titans, and I'm going to include all Titans in this. So we've got regular Titans here, and we've got pure, so the mythical one. I'm putting both of these into D tier. The reason why they go into D tier is because the only thing they've got is a shield and absolutely nothing else, whereas we have other dragons that have shields and other stuff on top. So that is the reason why I am leaving them there and not really thinking about them very much, because yeah, they've just, because of power creep, they've just been sort of outdone by other things. So it kind of sucks, but you know, it is what it is. And so next up we have the vampires, and I'm actually going to bring up the little infographic that goes through what each of the vampires, I guess, have, because we've got this that goes through each of the skills for these dragons. You can also check it in game, of course, but we've got all of these vampires, so you could always pause the video and read through each of them. But essentially, I think the worst vampire out of all of them is Usurper. I think that the next worst dragons are probably Wrathful, followed by Greedy. I think Greedy would be a really good dragon if and specifically if the AI actually worked and we played live opponents, but we don't. So I think Usurper, Wrathful, and Greedy are some of the worst. Gluttonous has also fallen off because of just how many Reaper perks there are out there now, so I don't think that skill gets as much use as it probably should anymore. And then we've got Bio Augmented. Actually, Bio Augmented is one of the worst vampires as well. So we have a slight split in the vampires. But that being said, if you've never actually seen a vampire skill before, the primary use for vampire dragons is going to be in their Leech Fang. Leech Fang alone is what carries corrupted dragons, and it does carry vampires as well. So the main use is going to be Leech Fang, but then you do have a second skill on vampires, and like Sinful, for instance, has Asphyxia, which has Wind that gives an extra turn, and then we've got dragons like Prideful that have Leech plus Reckless Victory, so huge damage is dealt, but the user is also hurt. And I think Prideful Vampire is one that can deal tons and tons of damage. He definitely has a lot of use as like an insta-killing machine. So there are different tiers with these vampires, so that is the reason why I'm gonna pop Usurper, Greedy, all of these together. Yeah, I'm popping all of those into C tier. I'm actually going to pop Gluttonous into B tier, purely because I don't think his skill is quite as useful as it used to be. But I do think you can still get a lot of potential out of it. The others are kind of whatever. And you know what? I'm actually going to pop Envious there as well. And then the remaining three that we've got, we have Sinful, Blood God, and Hexed. And I'm actually going to pop these three into A tier. And now that may be a little bit of a bit of a hot debate with those vampires and the way that I've placed them. But the reason why I pop these three in A tier, Blood God, I will say, gets better the more perks you place on him because it helps with his healing. Blood God is basically just a healing machine. Sinful, his Asphyxia alone genuinely comes in handy a lot of the time, and Leech on top is very good, and plus I really like having Leech on Chaos, believe it or not. And that is one thing you have to take into account with these vampires, what their Leech element is. But then we've also got Hex, which I think Hex just has a lot of potential with her multi-hit as well. You can take down shields. So that is the reason why I have made that distinction between these vampires. But again, if you ever want to go through each of their skills, then you can see that here in this little infographic. But Bio Augmented, again, it's random, so I don't really like random. And Envious, it does deal damage to all enemies, but it's small to medium damage, not any higher than that, which is kind of but sometimes it can come in handy. Hence why I'm putting him in B tier rather than any higher or any lower. Now, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, have I forgotten anyone? I can't remember if I have. If I have, I'm sure you'll let me know. But this is my rough tier list ranking for right now. So there are a couple of those that are a little bit personal biases, I will admit. But I don't think it's a horrific tier list. I don't think anything's too questionable. You can possibly put the Eternals, pop maybe the mythical ones into C tier. I can see that being a thing as well. Honestly, I don't think it would be the worst in the world. I think it would be fine like this as well. I'm not really too fussed. I think Eternals have some potential, but they're not fantastic. Again, in C tier, we've got these vampires, but the vampires will still get use out of their Leech. But then again, you're still going to get like the plasmas, the quantums that directly counter dragons. You've got the high damage on some of the redemptions. Dual Parliament does have the multiple hits. Then in B tier, we have some random dragons that are like downgraded versions of some other copies of their family members, or maybe they are just, you know, like Deadlock Plasma, a slight upgrade to her previous versions. Then A tier, we have quite a lot of dragons. So you can't see every single dragon for every single family because I've only picked one or two from each family, and because otherwise this turns into a massive page of dragons. But I'm sure you get the idea. This is a family-based ranking list, but if there's any difference in skills, then that does change. And before you say, but that's not true because each of the Walking Deads is so different because of their other skills, I don't agree. I think all of the Walking Dead dragons are at the same category. I think all of the Arcanas are at the same category. I think that Corrupted Legend and Corrupted Chaos could also sit here. So again, I'm not going to contest this one too much. He could either sit between A and S tier, but I think he's very, very good right now in his current arena against White Tip Berserker. So that's another reason why I'm popping him there. And then with the Spike Dragons, again, I could also see these maybe sort of sitting here. So maybe we'd see a tier list more like this. Similar to this, mayhaps. Maybe even throw Permawound in S tier. You know, we could change a couple of things around, but you know, the ones that are contestuous between A and S tier, I'm sure you understand that I've given my reasons why for each of those, so I hope that that makes sense. Now, if you're going to ask me which dragon should you use as a whole, any of these you can use, but any of the A to S tier dragons, 100% you can get good usage out of them, definitely. Even some of the B tiers, like especially even C tiers or B tiers for like Deadlocked, if you have a specific dragon that you're trying to counter, hell yes, just have them as an option. Karmas obviously are very RNG, but they're always a solid pick. Vampires as a whole are always going to be solid picks, but if you're going to pick the best of the best, it's going to be your Sinfuls, your Blood Gods, your Hex, or in particular Circus Asses, I guess maybe Glut, but I've fallen out of love with his skill a lot now, like I said, because of Reaper perks. But anyway, I'm going to keep waffling. So for now, I hope that I triggered you sufficiently with this listing. But again, be aware that some of this can change between maybe one or two of the tiers. I wouldn't change anything beyond one tier. I don't think I would at max do one tier shift for a few of them, but let me know what you think. Is there anything that you absolutely hate about this list? Anything that you think I've overlooked or whatever? Let me know. You know, I do own most of these dragons. I have tested out some of these via other means, but as a whole, I will say that, you know, there are certain dragons that I do prefer over others, and I will say that Sinful Vampire and Corrupted Legend hard carried me through a lot. Same with my Michonne Dragon, they have hard carried me through a lot of arenas by themselves in some cases. Sinful as my first level, well, as my only level 70, genuinely does so much work for me. And so that's the reason why when people try and, you know, saying, oh, but Ifixi is not all that great, it's mainly for new players. Well, I think Leech alone and having Leech on a particular element does good work, very good work in certain arenas. So yes, a little bit of personal bias, but also the reason why I leveled these dragons up is because I thought that they were good in the first place. I wouldn't have done it if I thought that the dragons were bad. So there is that. But guards, very good dragons as well. Harpy's about to be E5, which obviously that's going into the territory of heroic VIPs. And we haven't spoken about heroic VIPs today. They are very different. They have different sets of skills. They have different uses and also different arenas that they sit in. But I hope this gave you a good overall insight into what my views are on these dragons at the moment. I hope it makes or helps some people to either make a decision or just to become more aware of what these dragons do. But for now, I'm going to continue on with my heroic race. So I appreciate you joining me here today, and ciao.